All right, let's dive right into a message that is just packed with radical hope. But here's the thing, it was delivered at a moment of absolute national crisis. We're talking about the prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 30, which is basically a promise of restoration written right on the very edge of destruction.
You know, the prophecy doesn't start with comfort. Not at all. It opens with sheer terror. I mean, that one line just plunges us straight into the heart of the crisis. We're talking widespread panic and dread. You can almost feel the tension, can't you?
And that right there, that sets up the central question for us. When everything seems totally lost, when an entire nation is literally facing its end, what does a promise for the future even look like? And more importantly, what can it possibly tell us today?
Okay, so the first clue is actually in how this message was delivered. See, it wasn't just spoken out loud, it was meant to last. And for the prophet Jeremiah, that was a pretty unusual command.
Yeah, what's so fascinating here is the command itself. See, a lot of other prophecies were spoken, passed down orally, but this one was to be written down in a book, and that was totally intentional. The whole point was to create a permanent, documented source of hope that could literally be carried into exile and read by generations to come.
Now, to really get the weight of this, you gotta understand the timeline. Okay, so we're talking about Jerusalem somewhere around 593 to 586 BC. The city is just years away from its final destruction. The Babylonian Empire is this massive superpower, and it's tightening its grip. Plus, the northern kingdom of Israel, they were already conquered and scattered over a century before this. So this message, it was for everyone, promising reunion and return right in the face of complete and total disaster.
But before we get to any restoration, the prophecy describes a period of suffering that is so intense, it actually gets its own name, the time of Jacob's trouble.
And the imagery here is wow. It's one of the most vivid and shocking metaphors in the entire book. It describes grown men, warriors, with their hands on their waists, contorted in agony like a woman in labor. It's this picture of pain and terror so overwhelming it just shatters all normal human experience. We're not talking about a bad day here. This was a full-on society-level collapse. So that phrase, the time of Jacob's trouble, it signifies this totally unique, unparalleled period of national anguish for the descendants of Jacob, for Israel. The text itself says it's a day so great that none is like it. I mean, this is the ultimate crisis. And this reveals something really crucial about how these prophecies often work. A lot of scholars talk about a dual horizon. So on the one hand, you have the immediate fulfillment, the absolutely horrific destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon in 586 BC. But the text also seems to point to something else, a far future fulfillment, a final time of trouble in the latter days that comes right before the ultimate restoration. But then, right at the absolute peak of this terrifying vision, the prophecy makes a hard pivot. Just when it seems hopeless, after all the trouble, comes the promise. After the breaking comes the restoration. And here it is, the first real glimmer of light. The promise is to break the yoke from their neck. Now, that yoke was the symbol of the Babylonian Empire, of their oppression and servitude. So the promise is simple: freedom. Freedom from foreign domination. And what's incredible is how history seems to bear this out. The prophecy said that the nations that scattered them would face a full end. And just look at the timeline. The mighty Assyrian Empire, it fell. The Babylonian Empire that was causing all this trouble, it fell. The Persian Empire after them, it fell too. But the promise was that Israel, even though it was being disciplined, would be preserved. Now, the text is also brutally honest about why all this was happening. It uses this metaphor of an incurable wound. This wasn't just a case of bad luck, you know? It was a deep sickness caused by their own moral corruption and all these foolish political alliances they'd made with other empires, like Egypt, which, surprise, surprise, couldn't save them in the end. And then, right after diagnosing this wound as humanly incurable, comes the promise that God himself will be the one to heal it. The nation was being called an outcast, basically left for dead by the rest of the world. But the prophecy promises a divine intervention, a supernatural healing, a complete restoration of health. Okay, so what does this restored nation actually look like? Well, the next part of the promise focuses on its leadership, and honestly, it's a total game changer. The prophecy says the people will serve David their king. Now, obviously, King David himself had been dead for centuries, so this isn't talking about literally bringing him back. It's a messianic promise. It's pointing to a future, ideal ruler from David's own family line who would govern them. And get this, the language used is really specific. It says, "This ruler will approach unto me," which is a phrase that has these heavy priestly connotations. It suggests a leader who is both a king and some kind of mediator.
So, when you put it all together, the return from exile, the healing of the nation, this new Davidic king, it's all building to one central point. The ultimate goal of all this restoration isn't just political, it's relational.
And here it is. This is really the heart of the entire Bible's covenant story, just stated in its simplest, most powerful form. After all the trouble, the punishment, and the healing, the end goal is to restore this fundamental relationship. That's what it was all for.
And what's so incredible is just how quickly history started moving in this very direction. I mean, within a few decades of Jerusalem's fall, Babylon itself falls to Persia. Then the Persian king, Cyrus, issues a decree that lets the exiles return. And pretty soon after that, the Second Temple and the city walls are being rebuilt. The very promises that were written down in their darkest hour started to unfold right before their eyes.
Which really leaves us with this one final thought to chew on. This ancient text, it lays out this powerful cycle: crisis, then judgment, and then, completely against all odds, restoration and hope. So I guess the question for us is, how does a 2,600-year-old promise, one that was born in a moment of total collapse, continue to speak into our own times of trouble and uncertainty today?